Harlem, New York, Saturday night, July 12, 1930. 11:38 p.m. The Cotton Club on Lenox Avenue was absolutely packed to the walls, its air thick with jazz and cigarette smoke. Over 200 patrons in tuxedos and evening gowns crowded the horseshoe of tables around the glimmering stage. Duke Ellington's orchestra was in full swing, blasting out a hot jazz number that set toes tapping under linen-draped tables. The wealthy white downtown crowd rubbed shoulders with Tammany Hall politicians, sports heroes, and showbiz celebrities, alongside notorious gangland figures, in a scene that made the Cotton Club both glamorous and dangerous. Illegal champagne and whiskey flowed freely despite prohibition, delivered by attentive waiters in red jackets. The Cotton Club was the aristocrat of Harlem, where high society came to flirt with danger under the guise of nightlife glamour. Little did the crowd know, history was quietly taking a seat in the back of the room. On stage, a line of tall, light-skinned chorus girls high-kicked in perfect time, dazzling the audience. Black performers commanded the spotlight, brilliant musicians, dancers, comedians, but beyond the footlights, the club enforced a strict color line. Not a single black patron sat among the all-white audience. That was the unspoken rule of the Cotton Club. The talent could be black, but the paying customers were to be white only. Around the room, faux palm trees and painted backdrops of cotton plantations created a make-believe exotic ambience. It was a fantasy version of the Old South that catered to the club's white audience, even as black performers gave the place its soul. In 1930s Harlem, racism wore a velvet glove. Most nights, that rule was as much a part of the club's atmosphere as the smoky jazz and clinking cocktail glasses. That Saturday night, however, an exception sat quietly near the back. At a small corner table in the shadows, a lone black man, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, sat nursing a bourbon and watching the show with steady, hooded eyes. He was well-dressed, a tailored charcoal suit, silk tie, and polished Oxford shoes, and he carried himself with the calm self-assurance of a paying customer who belonged. For nearly an hour, hardly anyone noticed him. The club's manager and staff were preoccupied with VIP guests near the stage, and the swirl of music and laughter drowned out any murmurs of confusion. A few nearby patrons cast side glances at the solitary figure in the corner, puzzled but unsure if they should react. Perhaps he was a visiting performer off-duty, or some rare black celebrity granted entry as a special favor. It was a breezy summer night full of music and mirth, the last moment of calm before an approaching storm. Owney, the Killer Madden, the notorious gangster owner of the Cotton Club, sat at his usual reserved table near the stage, entertaining a trio of city officials with expensive whiskey and off-color jokes. Madden was more than just the club's proprietor. He was one of New York's most feared racketeers. He'd made a fortune in bootleg liquor and wasn't shy about eliminating anyone who stood in his way. A stocky, sharp-dressed man with slicked-back hair and a cold grin, Madden prided himself on having the most exclusive club in the city. As he scanned the room mid-laugh, his eyes caught the lone dark-skinned patron at the back, and his smile vanished. In his club, in front of his high-class guests, someone was defying the whites-only policy. Not just anyone. After a second's incredulous stare, Madden realized it was Bumpy Johnson, a rising figure in Harlem's underworld. A colored gangster bold enough to sit in the Cotton Club like any white swell. It was unthinkable. Madden's face went absolutely white with fury. He slammed his glass down, splashing amber liquor onto the white tablecloth. Conversation at nearby tables lulled as heads turned toward the sudden commotion. Without a word to his companions, Owney Madden pushed back his chair and stood. The music and laughter around the room faltered as people noticed Madden's body language. Eyes locked on the back corner, posture stiff with anger. His personal bodyguards jumped up to follow as he started toward the rear of the club, each step bristling with outrage. Patrons fell silent and twisted in their seats to watch. They saw where Madden was headed and soon spotted the black man sitting where no black patron should be. By the time Madden reached that corner table, an uneasy hush had spread over the club. The stage band petered out mid-number, instruments trailing off one by one as the musicians realized something was very wrong in the audience. The Cotton Club had gone absolutely silent. Bumpy Johnson looked up from his drink just as Auntie Madden loomed over his table. Johnson did not stand. He remained seated, back straight, one hand resting calmly beside his half-finished bourbon glass. His dark eyes followed Madden's every movement. The air felt electric. Even in the dim back corner, dozens of onlookers were craning their necks, anticipating fireworks. Madden didn't bother with a polite greeting. He planted his palms on Bumpy's small table and leaned in, his face flushed red and contorted with rage. When he spoke, his voice rang out loud enough for half the club to hear. "You've got some nerve showing your face in here tonight, boy," Madden snarled, practically spitting the last word. He drew himself up, trembling with indignation. "We'll let you in. You think buying a suit and sneaking into my club makes you a guest? You think you could just walk in here, into my place, and pretend you're one of us?" Each question dripped with contempt. Gasps fluttered through the audience at Madden's open use of boy. Even in 1930, even in a segregated club, such naked hostility raised eyebrows. Bumpy Johnson said nothing. He gazed up at Madden with an unreadable expression, as still as a statue in the face of the gangster's tirade. Madden's two bulky henchmen hovered a step behind their boss, hands twitching near their holsters, waiting for signal. Madden's lip curled in disgust as he continued, louder. "This club is for white patrons only," he hissed, enunciating each word like a curse. "Colored performers on that stage, that's one thing. They know their place. But colored customers, drinking with white folks." He shook his head slowly. "Not a chance. I don't care who you are, Johnson. You don't belong here, and you damn well know it." By now, the entire Cotton Club was watching and listening in dead silence. 200 people had stopped talking, stopped moving, some scarcely breathing. Auntie Madden, one of New York's most powerful mob bosses, was publicly dressing down Bumpy Johnson, a man many of them had only heard rumors about. The racial slurs and pure venom in Madden's voice shocked even those accustomed to everyday bigotry. A few of the white patrons smirked, enjoying the spectacle of a black man being put in his place, but many others glanced around anxiously, sensing they were witnessing the prelude to something explosive. For a long moment after Madden finished, Bumpy Johnson did not respond. He didn't flinch at the insults, didn't rise to meet Madden's towering posture. Calmly, almost leisurely, Bumpy reached for his bourbon. In the hush, the clink of ice against glass was audible. He took a slow sip, drained the glass, and set it down. Then Bumpy looked up and met Auntie Madden's glare with eyes that were eerily composed. When he spoke, Bumpy's voice was soft and steady, yet it carried clearly in the stillness. "You're telling me I don't belong in your club," he said, almost politely. "That a man like me can't sit here and spend money just like any other customer." He tilted his head slightly. "Mr. Madden, I grew up 5 blocks from this building. Harlem is my home, and your club, sitting right here in the middle of Harlem, says folks like me aren't welcome. Now, that's your policy, your choice." Bumpy paused, letting those words hang a moment. The crowd's eyes darted from the black gangster to the white one, their faces tense. But choices have consequences. A low murmur rustled among nearby tables at that quietly uttered line. Madden blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected defiance, much less in that measured tone. Bumpy continued evenly, voice calm, but with an icy undercurrent. "You've built a lot of success here, Mr. Madden. Fine liquor, famous music, all while pretending the people who live around this club don't exist, unless they're on your stage or serving your drinks." Bumpy leaned forward just a fraction, his gaze never leaving Madden's. "That ends, one way or another. I'll give you 1 week to change that policy, to open these doors to black customers. 7 days. If you don't, he let the sentence trail off into a cold little smile. Well, like I said, choices of consequences. The silence that followed was absolute. Did a black man, in 1930, in front of a room full of white witnesses, facing one of New York's deadliest gangsters, just issue an ultimatum? Those who heard Bumpy's soft-spoken words stared in astonishment. A city official at Madden's table sputtered, "Now see here," but Madden silenced him with a vicious swipe of his hand. For a heartbeat, Auntie Madden simply stood there, processing the unbelievable reality that Bumpy Johnson had dared give him a deadline. Then a harsh bark of laughter burst out of Madden. He threw back his head and laughed like he'd heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. 1 week, he roared, turning to address the now silent club. Did you all hear that? He gestured grandly at Bumpy, as if presenting a clown. This colored boy thinks he can give me a deadline. Thinks he can walk in my club and tell me how to run it. 7 days, he says. A few sycophantic chuckles surfaced among the onlookers, but most people remained stunned into silence. Madden's face hardened into a sneer as he looked back down at Bumpy. "Let me explain something to you, Johnson," he growled, voice dropping low and threatening. "There is no universe in which you dictate terms to Auntie Madden. You must be out of your goddamn mind." He jabbed a finger down onto the table. "In 7 days, you'll either be crawling back here to apologize, on your knees, or you'll be in a pine box. Those are your only options. There's no scenario where a Negro like you wins against a white man. That's just how the world works. If you're too stupid to understand that, I'll teach you the hard way." A collective chill ran through the audience at those words. 2 of Madden's bouncers stepped forward, anticipating violence. The atmosphere bristled with impending chaos, one match strike away from an all-out brawl or worse. Bumpy Johnson slowly stood up. He was slightly shorter than Madden, but an aura of quiet authority made him seem to fill the space. Despite the grave threats, Bumpy's face remained remarkably composed. No anger, no fear, just an implacable calm. He smoothed the front of his jacket, then spoke so quietly that only those nearest could hear. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Madden. You've got 7 days." Without another word, Bumpy turned and began walking toward the exit. It was as if he had decided this conversation was over, as if Auntie Madden were no longer worth his time. The 2 bodyguards stepped aside instinctively, unsure whether to intervene. A path opened among the patrons. Chairs scraped as people pulled back to avoid even brushing against Bumpy. In a heavy silence, dozens of eyes followed the tall, dark-suited figure as he made his way out. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the Cotton Club into the hot Harlem night. The air outside was thick and humid, buzzing with distant jazz and city life. A heartbeat later, the tension inside shattered. Dozens of whispered conversations erupted at once like steam escaping a boiler. Some patrons stared at Madden in disbelief. Others hurriedly signaled for their coats, eager to leave before whatever came next. Auntie Madden remained standing by the empty table, chest heaving with adrenaline. He'd never been challenged like that. Certainly not by a black man, and certainly not in public. A vein pulsed angrily at his temple as he tried to process what had just happened. After a moment, Madden barked a sharp order at the band. "Play," he snapped. Duke Ellington, hovering uncertainly at the piano, exchanged a look with his horn players and struck up a tune. The orchestra jumped in, though far more timidly than before. The abrupt blare of jazz did little to dispel the pall over the room. Waiters resumed circulating, and the illusion of normalcy crept back, but nothing was normal now. With forced joviality, Madden returned to his table of visibly uncomfortable guests. He poured himself another drink and launched into an exaggerated recounting of the incident, trying to spin it as a funny story. How he'd put that uppity colored boy in his place. Nervous laughter flitted around nearby tables. Yet even as Madden boasted, His eyes kept flicking toward the club's entrance, and his hand trembled slightly as he lifted his glass. Auntie Madden went to bed as dawn neared, still riding a liquor-fueled haze of anger and disbelief. In his final thoughts before sleep, he likely imagined that the problem of Bumpy Johnson was over, that the humiliation he'd dealt out in front of hundreds of witnesses had ended the matter. He was wrong. 6 hours and 20 minutes after Bumpy Johnson walked out of the Cotton Club, the first in a series of events would prove just how costly Auntie Madden's mistake had been. While Madden slept off his whiskey in triumph, Bumpy Johnson's retribution had already been set in motion. At 6:23 a.m. on Sunday, July 13th, a sanitation worker in central Harlem stumbled upon a large metal garbage drum that seemed suspiciously heavy. Opening it, he nearly fell backward. Inside was the bloodied, crumpled body of Auntie Madden's head doorman, Earl Big Ears Dillard. The worker's shout drew a small crowd of early risers. Within minutes, uniformed police arrived and pushed the gawkers back. As two officers gingerly tipped over the drum and rolled out the corpse, horrified whispers rippled through the onlookers. Dillard's mashed hands and mutilated face left no doubt that his death had been slow and brutal. Pinned to his chest was a piece of paper with a few terse words scrawled in pencil. 1 down, 7-0 go. Open your doors. Harlem for Harlem. One of the officers read the note aloud in a shaky voice, and a murmur of shock passed through the gathering crowd. It was obvious to everyone that this was no random murder. It was the opening salvo of something much larger. An unmistakable message was being sent, one that threatened more violence to come. The police detectives who arrived exchanged uneasy glances as they bagged the note as evidence. They knew immediately that a gang war had exploded in Harlem, indeed unlike anything they'd seen. A black gang war on white gangsters. That was unheard of. Seasoned detectives traded nervous looks. This was indeed no ordinary underworld spat. By 9 a.m., word of Dillard's grisly demise had spread through New York's underworld. Auntie Madden himself, roused from his sleep by frantic aides, read the note in disbelief and seething rage. His face went absolutely pale. He didn't need any more confirmation of who was behind this. The ultimatum 7 days on the note, and the target told him everything. Bumpy Johnson had meant every word he said. Madden mobilized his organization within the hour. Orders flew out to every available enforcer on his payroll. Find Bumpy Johnson and his men now. Bring them in or bring their heads. Madden didn't care which. He wanted blood for blood. Yet as Sunday wore on, his goons turned up nothing. Bumpy Johnson had simply vanished. His usual haunts, an apartment on 134th Street, the barber shop where he played chess, the diners where he ate, all were empty or reported no sign of him. Friends and associates, when bribed or threatened, claimed they knew nothing. Whether out of loyalty or fear, or both, Harlem's underworld had clammed up tight. The underworld code of silence held strong. By sunrise, Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson was nowhere to be found. Over the next week, he took on a ghostly presence in Harlem, apparent only in the deadly handiwork left behind each day, and never spotted by the desperate men hunting him. Meanwhile, the police swarmed Harlem like angry hornets. By midday Sunday, whispers of a brewing gang conflict ran through every speakeasy and street corner. Some residents felt a grim satisfaction as news spread of what had happened to Earl Dillard. Big Ears had been a symbol of their humiliation, the white bruiser at the club doors who literally kept black people out. Seeing him taken down, brutally, yes, but taken down nonetheless, felt to some like overdue justice. Few voiced these thoughts openly, certainly not to the police or to Madden's thugs asking questions. But an unmistakable current of vindication coursed through the neighborhood. Harlem had long been humiliated by the Cotton Club's policies. Now it appeared someone was finally hitting back. Just 1 day later, the next strike came. Tuesday, July 15th, 2:15 a.m. Victor Remick, the Cotton Club's floor manager, was on his way home with 2 bodyguards in a Ford sedan. They had no idea Bumpy's men were tailing them through the quiet pre-dawn streets. On a deserted block of Lenox Avenue, a dark sedan roared up alongside Remick's car. Suddenly, tot. Gunfire erupted in the pre-dawn shadows. The ambush was over in seconds. One of Remick's guards managed to squeeze off a few wild shots. Police later found bullet holes pocking the brick storefronts. But within moments, Remick's sedan careened into a lamppost and rolled to a smoking stop at the curb. When officers arrived minutes later, they found a bloody tableau. Remick sprawled lifeless over the steering wheel, executed by a single gunshot to the back of the head, and his 2 escorts slumped in the back seat riddled with bullets. Pinned to Remick's blood-soaked jacket was a note identical in style to the first. 2 down, 6 to go. Open your doors. Harlem for Harlem. By sunrise, small knots of residents hovered at a distance, gawking at the bullet-riddled car and whispering in disbelief. Whoever was doing this clearly wasn't afraid of striking on the open streets of Harlem. The brazenness of this second hit left no doubt that an organized effort was underway to dismantle Auntie Madden's grip on Harlem. Seasoned detectives on the scene traded uneasy glances. They knew this was open warfare in Harlem. City Hall was flooded with angry calls that morning. The mayor demanded an immediate end to the violence. A Harlem gang war spilling into upscale streets was a political nightmare. The police brass, under intense pressure, barked orders for raids and dragnets. Inside the Cotton Club's back offices, Auntie Madden was beside himself with fury and, for the first time in years, truly afraid. By now, he had gathered the remaining key members of his Harlem crew and essentially barricaded them inside the club, which stayed shuttered during daylight hours. Remick's daylight murder on a public street had proved that even a man under armed guard could be taken out. Madden's men whispered among themselves in terror, each secretly wondering who would be next on Bumpy Johnson's deadly list. That Tuesday afternoon, a plain envelope was found slipped under the Cotton Club's locked front door. Inside, a note in the same block letters read, 3 down, 5 to go. How many bodies will it take, Auntie? Madden tore the message to shreds in a fury. By midday Wednesday, Madden's composure was crumbling. 3 of his essential men were dead in 3 days. Enraged and sleep-deprived, he threatened his own hirelings in futile frustration. His lieutenant, Frenchie DeLank, tried to keep a cool head. At one point, Frenchie ventured, "Boss, maybe we ought to at least pretend to give that guy what he wants, just to stop the bleeding, regroup later." Madden's eyes flared, and he slammed his glass down. "Negotiate? With that nigger? Over my dead body," he roared, face livid. He slammed a fist on the table, whiskey sloshing. "That uppity nigger's going to die," Madden snarled, making some of his own men flinch at the venom in his voice. Madden, of course, would hear none of any talk of compromise. Instead, he doubled the bounties he'd placed on Johnson's crew. Word went out on the criminal grapevine, $10,000 for anyone who could give up Bumpy Johnson's location, no questions asked. It was an enormous sum in those Depression days, a tempting fortune to many, but it didn't matter. Nobody came forward, whether out of fear or fierce loyalty to Harlem. The underworld's code of silence held firm. If we kill all 8, how do we survive the fallout? One of Bumpy's men finally dared to ask in a low voice during a secret meeting. Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Schultz can't kill what he can't find," he said, referring to Madden by a derisive nickname. "And he won't find us. Not with all of Harlem on our side." Johnson looked each man in the eye around that basement table. "After what happened to the club, you think any of our people will help Madden? Not a chance. Harlem will keep us hidden." His men nodded solemnly. They believed him, and they believed Harlem would shelter them because Auntie Madden had made this conflict about more than just business. Bumpy's ultimatum had become a matter of community pride. All week long, Harlem's residents had truly been holding their breath. Each morning's dawn brought word of another body, and each rumor proved true by noon. On stoops and in barbershops, People spoke in cautious whispers of Bumpy Johnson's one-man uprising. There was fear of what might follow, but also a swelling pride. Harlem had never seen a black man stand up to a white mob boss in such a way. By Thursday, an almost celebratory defiance had taken root on the streets. Auntie Madden had tried to intimidate Harlem, and now Harlem, through Bumpy, was returning the favor with interest. Late Tuesday night, technically the early minutes of Wednesday, July 16th, Bumpy's men struck again. They slipped past police protection and got into the apartment of Harold Pokerface Weiss, the Cotton Club's bookkeeper and payoff man. One of Weiss's neighbors, a young woman he fancied, knocked on his door, whispering nervously that she'd seen a shadow on the fire escape. Paranoid and on edge, Weiss unlatched the door chain to investigate. That was all it took. Two dark-clad figures shoved their way inside the moment the door cracked open. His muffled screams never escaped the apartment walls as the sharp steel of an ice pick punched into him again and again. The attackers worked with methodical viciousness, gagging Weiss with a towel and stabbing him repeatedly in non-lethal spots to prolong his agony. Weiss tried to bargain, offering money, information, anything, but his pleas were met only with the next thrust of the ice pick. Within minutes, Weiss lay lifeless on the floor amid overturned furniture, his blood soaking into the rug. He was found in his living room at dawn by a pair of detectives, with a blood-smeared note pinned to his chest reading, 3 down, 5 to go. When detectives read this third note, a chill ran through the precinct. Bumpy Johnson was just getting started. By Wednesday morning, newspapers blared about a Harlem gangland killing spree. Rumors flew about who might be behind it. Some whispered it was Italian mafiosi moving in, others fancifully blamed vengeful Harlem spirits. But inside the neighborhood, everyone already knew. Bumpy Johnson was delivering on his promise, and many in Harlem quietly cheered it. With each new corpse found, more locals murmured approval behind closed doors. It was dangerous to celebrate openly, yet pride simmered in private. By midday Wednesday, 5 of Madden's key people were gone in 3 days. The pattern was undeniable, and the 7-day deadline loomed large. That evening, around 8 p.m. on Wednesday, July 16th, the 4th target fell. Danny the Kid Miller, a young Irish enforcer known for doing Madden's dirty work, made the fatal mistake of stepping out of the Cotton Club's fortified confines. Miller left by a side door with another guard to fetch Frenchie DeLange's stomach medicine from a nearby pharmacy. They walked briskly down the block, scanning every shadow. Halfway to their destination, as they passed a narrow alley mouth, 2 figures emerged like ghosts to block their path. A short, thin man and a tall, broad-shouldered one, each aiming a pistol with calm intent. The guard opened his mouth to shout a warning, but thump, thump. 2 silenced shots hit him center mass. He crumpled to the sidewalk without a sound. Miller froze only a split second, but it was a split second too long. The tall gunman closed in and slammed Miller against the alley wall. Miller barely had time to reach for his weapon before a muzzle pressed up under his chin. One trigger pulls silence him for good. In the split second before that shot, Miller's eyes went wide. He recognized one of the attackers as a Harlem tough he'd dismissed as insignificant, just a face from the neighborhood. That face was the last thing Danny Miller ever saw. The attackers pinned a folded note to Miller's bloodied shirt for the world to see. 4 down, 4 to go. By that night, roughly half of Bumpy's 1-week deadline had passed. In just 3 days, 4 of Madden's key men were gone. Half the list eliminated with systematic, ruthless precision. Bumpy's grim countdown was right on schedule, and nothing indicated he would stop. Miller's public killing in the street sent shockwaves through both the underworld and officialdom. City officials were indeed demanding action. The police commissioner himself was receiving panic calls. It was politically explosive to have gangland gunfights erupting in the open. The mayor's office pressured the NYPD for results, and fast. Detective Sean Brady, The very police detective on Madden's payroll assigned to keep the Cotton Club safe felt this heat intimately. Privately, Brady understood the predicament. How do you stop an invisible enemy sheltered by an entire neighborhood? Thursday pre-dawn, July 17th, found Detective Brady making a decision born of fear. He decided to slip away from Harlem, to duck out of sight until this all blew over. Early Thursday morning, Detective Sean Brady, Madden's pet police protector, tried to slip away to a secret hideout in the Bronx. The detective had crept out of the Cotton Club under heavy guard, but as he crossed into the Bronx, he dismissed his two escorts, believing he could shake any pursuit. That decision sealed his fate. It didn't save him. Around 5 a.m., a grocer taking out the trash behind a shop found Brady's corpse face down in an alley. He had been strangled with a thin garrote wire. His eyes bulged and his tongue protruded. The wire was still cruelly embedded in his purpled throat when they found him. Brady's service revolver never left its holster. The note pinned to his trench coat read, 5 down, 3 to go. Even hardened observers on the force were stunned to see a police detective taken out like common prey. When news of Brady's end reached Auntie Madden later that morning, the gangster could no longer hide the fear creeping into his gut. Losing underlings was one thing. Losing a high-placed ally in the police signaled that nothing was out of bounds now. Thursday passed in a haze for Madden. 4 of his men were gone, plus his bought detective. Nearly his entire Harlem operation decimated in 4 days. He barricaded himself in his uptown headquarters, having closed the Cotton Club entirely for maintenance. Inside, he was joined by the last of his inner circle. Only 2 of Madden's core operators remain alive in Harlem now. Charlie Lucky Charms O'Donnell, a hardened but jittery lieutenant, and Frenchie DeLank himself. Both understood they were likely next. Frenchie realized survival meant disappearing entirely. He quietly persuaded Madden to evacuate to a safer location outside Harlem that weekend and made his own plans to slip away. In the early hours of Friday, July 18th, Bumpy's crew even managed to strike inside the Cotton Club itself. They engineered a sudden power outage in the dead of night, plunging the club into pitch darkness while Frenchie and a dozen of Madden's hired guns were on watch. In the chaos, 2 of Bumpy's men slipped through a back delivery door that a sympathetic black employee had accidentally left unlatched. For 2 full minutes, the Cotton Club was thrown into blind panic. Madden's men cursed and fired shots at shadows, utterly on edge. In the darkness, discipline and loyalty among Madden's goons proved far thinner than the attackers' resolve. Herman Stark, the club's longtime stage manager and an unofficial member of Madden's crew, pressed himself against a backstage wall, heart hammering, as boot steps and hushed scuffles echoed around him. He fumbled for a hiding spot behind a heavy set piece. A shape rushed by, and Stark swallowed a scream. An instant later, iron-hard hands seized him from both sides. The assassins found Stark alone in a back corridor and fell upon him with blades. Stark had time for one strangled yelp before a long knife plunged deep into his abdomen. In the blackness, he was virtually silent prey. When the emergency lights finally flickered on 2 minutes later, they revealed a ghastly sight on the Cotton Club's grand stage. Herman Stark's lifeless body propped grotesquely against a scenery backdrop from the last review. He had been stabbed over a dozen times. Blood dripped down the painted jungle backdrop. His hands had been folded in his lap around a bundle of Cotton Club programs in a macabre parody of his duties. And pinned to Stark's chest, squarely through the white dress shirt, was the by now familiar paper. 6 down, 2 to go. It was, indeed, a statement. We can reach you anywhere. Madden and his goons were horrified to find Stark, one of their own, slaughtered right under their noses. How had the killers gotten in? They later discovered a basement door lock had been tampered with. How had they managed to butcher Stark under the guard of so many armed men? The symbolism of Stark's death on his own stage, amid the club's glamorous trappings, was not lost on anyone. It was a ruthless demonstration that Bumpy's crew could strike at will. By Friday morning, less than 5 full days into Bumpy's ultimatum, 6 of Madden's men were dead. Nearly his entire Harlem enterprise had been wiped out in under a week. The unthinkable was happening. Auntie Madden, so long considered untouchable, was being systematically dismantled. Dutch Schultz and other mob bosses downtown began hearing unsettling whispers of what was transpiring in Harlem. White gangsters who dealt with black operators after 1930 grew far more cautious about language and displays of contempt. The tale of Bumpy's Harlem triumph was told in every speakeasy and pool hall, a cautionary story none would forget. Auntie Madden's remaining cronies were terrified. The last 2 men on Bumpy's list were indeed Charlie O'Donnell and Frenchie DeLank. O'Donnell was nearly hysterical by Friday, convinced he would be the next corpse on the morning news. Frenchie had to physically restrain him from bolting out into the street. By Friday night, Madden and Frenchie decided their only hope was flight. They arranged a convoy of cars to slip out of Harlem under cover of darkness and head for one of Madden's safe houses in Hell's Kitchen. Very early Saturday, July 19th, Frenchie made his attempt to escape Harlem along with O'Donnell. They fled by car in a small 3-vehicle convoy. Charlie O'Donnell huddled in the back seat of Frenchie's Hudson sedan, eyes wide and a revolver clutched in his sweaty hand. He kept glancing behind them, flinching at every shadow. Frenchie, gripping the wheel, told him to stay calm. They'd be safe once they got far enough away. But O'Donnell's heart would not stop hammering in his chest. It didn't work. On a deserted industrial stretch in the South Bronx, Bumpy's men sprang their trap. A flaming gasoline bottle suddenly exploded against Frenchie's car hood, turning the vehicle into an instant fireball. In the same moment, shotgun blasts tore through the Hudson's windows. Charlie O'Donnell's chest was blown open by the first blast. He toppled out of the back seat without a sound, dead before he hit the ground. Frenchie DeLank, hit in the shoulder by flying glass and buckshot, scrambled out the passenger door and fled into the darkness amid the chaos. He didn't stop running for blocks, blood dripping from his shoulder, panic propelling his every step. The veteran gangster had never known fear like what he felt in that moment. He was the sole target to slip through Bumpy's net alive. At first light, firefighters dousing the burnt-out Hudson found O'Donnell's body and, nearby in the alley gutter, a charred scrap of paper that read, 7 down, 1 to go. Later that Saturday morning, Auntie Madden received his final message from Bumpy Johnson, delivered by courier to the Midtown apartment where he was hiding. Its words were unmistakable, the threat and the ultimatum in full. 7 of your men are dead. Auntie, the block letter note read, they died because you made a choice to disrespect me in public, to call me names in front of all those people. 1930 would forever be remembered in Harlem as the year the Cotton Club opened its doors to everyone, because Bumpy Johnson gave it no choice. 8 bodies in 7 days had made the point with brutal clarity. Respect for Harlem was no longer optional. It was a matter of survival. And so, in the summer of 1930, Harlem had witnessed a transformation, one written in blood and boldness, echoing down through the generations. Harlem belonged to Harlem again, and nothing in New York City would ever be quite the same. Bumpy Johnson had done precisely what he promised. He brought Auntie Madden to his knees in the span of a week and ensured Harlem would never be the same. It was a lesson written in blood that the city would remember for generations. 8 bodies in 7 days. Harlem's underworld had spoken, and its voice would echo for the next century. It was a new era for Harlem's underworld.